Welcome to episode 2 of the Middle-Aged Outlaws podcast. Last week we started off with our top 5 heel turns. This week, 30 men enter, only one man leaves the winner. We're hopping on to the road to Wrestlemania with our top 5 Royal Rumble matches.
Go ahead, pop off, me and my clique, put on. I'm like a young McMahon, I'm here to get your bitch off. Like I'm Ric Flair, little finger to the big boss. Man, aka police, guess I'm over your head like hit toss.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to episode 2 of the Middle-Aged Outlaws podcast. Last episode we had our top 5 heel turns, and despite some audio issues in which it sounded like I was going through a train for the majority of the episode, I think it went well. I've got Adam with me as always, my partner in crime. How are you, Adam?
Hello, very good. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm alright, thanks. We've managed to get here to episode 2. Let's see if we make it to episode 3. So today we're talking about the Royal Rumble. Talking about our top 5 Royal Rumble matches of all time. I have to say that this has been massively fun to research. Don't know about you, but I've certainly enjoyed it.
Yeah, I've watched a few and made some mistakes with my timelines that have resulted in some late changes of order and things like that, but it still meant watching all the stuff, which is all good.
I'm intrigued and excited to find out what those are. Just before we get started on our picks, I've got a little bit of background on the Rumble here. So the very first Royal Rumble match took place in 1988, and there were 20 participants to start off with. Do you know who won that first Rumble?
Oh, was it someone like Hacksaw Jim Duggan?
It was.
Yeah.
It's impressive. Yeah. I like it. Oh,
I could remember it wasn't Hogan or anyone like that. I just, I had a feeling for Jim Duggan.
Did you watch it? Watch the first one though?
I didn't. It didn't strike me as one that I would need to look at to know that I wasn't picking it.
Yeah, me too. Although you probably could have got through it in like a 5-minute work break or something like that. 20 participants. They upped the stakes for the Rumble for the very first time in 1992 when the winner would win the vacated World Wrestling Federation Championship. And then from 1993, what we've become accustomed to now was the winner would be granted a title shot at WrestleMania. I wonder what year they started pointing at the sign. Sometimes the point is too much. There's no subtlety involved.
Yeah, I think whatever the situation when they're doing the point, I still remember the great debut of Ronda Rousey when everything looked so good and she looked so happy to be there, but then the point was the fakest thing I've ever seen in my life. That people just need to learn how to point.
There's one of the ones, I think it's one of the ones on my list actually, where the point goes on longer than quite a lot of guys were actually in the Rumble for. In 2004, due to the brand split, which I think happened 2 years prior, we had the first time where the winner was given the choice of which title to pick that they were going to fight for at WrestleMania. I think at that point that included the ECW title as well from 2004.
Yeah.
And then in 2011, and I've not researched this, and this is really random, and I'm sure there's some background to it, but there were 40 participants in the 2011 Royal Rumble, with the winner entering at number 38. And that is to date the longest Royal Rumble there's been, unsurprisingly.
I take it was just a one-off. They went back to 30 after that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Do you, any guesses as to who won that one? 2011.
2011. Oh, it would be a wild guess.
It could be anybody.
Edge?
No.
No.
It was Alberto Del Rio.
Ah, okay.
Number 38. Nice pick. And in 2018 we had the first ever women's Royal Rumble match. And Asuka, current women's champion Asuka, was the first ever winner of the Women's Rumble. Nice. Which, you know, I was reflecting on that when I was I was writing that down and thinking that's pretty cool that they can now do a women's rumble, and that they've got more than 30 women on the roster that are good to be in a rumble.
Yeah, I mean, I think when they did it, they called on a couple of veterans, but they were pretty good. I think it was like Lita and Trish and people like that.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I mean, if you think back a few years, they just wouldn't have been able to do it. They didn't have enough that were actual workers.
Yeah.
They just all had this sort of model look. But I think the talent's there now to be able to do it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So yeah, that's our background. Like I think everybody, even if people don't like wrestling, they know the phrase Royal Rumble.
Yeah.
I think on a normal Black Friday sale, people might refer to Tesco and Asda as a bit of a Royal Rumble. Like it feels to me like it's a bit of a cool thing that a kind of casual fan would make time to watch. And I know when I was out the loop, I would always go back and you know, it's coming around January time, I would probably say to you, are you watching the Rumble this year? I think I might actually watch it this year. It's always been one of the things that, I don't know, you can easily pick it up and watch it. What makes a good Royal Rumble to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it always felt like it was this sort of special once a year, one-off match, and it's really exciting, you know, every 60 seconds or 90 seconds or 2 minutes, however they want to pace it, you know, something can happen, somebody interesting can come in. And also I think when they up the stakes, so obviously the title one you referenced in 92, and then from 93 onwards, there really being something at stake, which was a title shot, which made it feel like the official start of the, you know, to use the phrase, the road to WrestleMania. And once the stakes went up to that, it just felt more. It became sort of the most important one-off match of the year, really. And I think also, like, there's a few things I'll talk about as I'm going through my picks, but I think you can make someone in it, and they don't necessarily actually need to win it. They can, you know, have their big breakthrough moment at a Rumble, or you can start a big feud at a Rumble. And I think they've at times, you know, used it for bringing back some veterans to get the big crowd pop. But they also, if you think back to when they debuted AJ Styles, and that came at a Rumble, and the crowd reaction was amazing.
Huge.
And immediately sort of made him a main eventer.
Yeah.
And it's just that kind of match where you can do it, and I don't know that they have any like alternative elsewhere or any equivalent to it. It's just always feels pretty important. And I think, like you touched on there, I know people that watch from Rumble to Mania, and then they sort of tune out for the rest of the year, because that's to them, you know, the big part of the year for it. So yeah, I think it just always has that sort of special feel of an event.
You know, it's a shame in this current internet age that we've been living in for a while, that surprises like AJ Styles probably can't really happen. And I don't know, I don't think I was watching religiously when AJ Styles debuted, but I do know that he'd been playing it pretty close to his chest, and in interviews there was rumours, and he was being asked, and he was saying, you know, like he was saying, I'm available for January, I'm not busy in January, sort of thing. But it is a shame, because it's that crowd pop of someone returning, somebody come back from injury, which we'll probably talk about at some point across this this podcast. But yeah, and I was reading just before we came on here that WWE are very keen to get fans in for the 2021 Rumble, and like COVID aside, why would they not? I feel like the fans make 50% of the Rumble.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they get involved in the countdown, they react to the people, you know, sometimes they react negatively depending on the situation, but yeah, it does feel like an event that would really miss it if you didn't have them.
Yeah, definitely. Okie dokie. Shall we kick on?
Yep.
Shall we start our top five? I'll let you go first if you want to kick us off.
Yeah, that's fine by me.
Sorry. Just before we start, I can guarantee we're gonna have crossovers.
Yeah.
If we do, let's just roll them in together and chat about them together.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
But yeah, sorry, kick off.
Yeah, the first one I'm going to go for is the 2001 Rumble. So that's my number 5 pick. So I'm going to guess by the little pause that it's not on your list.
No, it is. It is. It's my number 1.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
But that's fine. Let's get into it. It's a cracking Rumble.
Yeah. So 21st of January 2001 was the date of this Rumble, and there were a few things that really stood out about it when I was doing my research that made me gravitate towards this one. I think for me, the company was still, I was just maybe slightly on the outs of the Attitude Era. It was just starting to transition into another era, but the big hitter superstars were generally still there, and it's not one where there's a surprise winner really. Stone Cold Steve Austin goes into it hot and he wins the Rumble match. But one of the things that stood out to me, and I know we have seen it over the years, it's happened a few times where someone will dominate for a period of time in the match.
Yep.
And I felt like it was kind of the making of Kane as a monster in that sense, that he could just completely dominate the ring. And I think I'm just looking at my notes to see how many eliminations he had in total, because I know it was a lot. 11. So, through the course of the match, he's eliminated 11 people.
How ridiculous was that performance?
Yeah, it was amazing. And, you go from that to believing he's a main eventer, even though he didn't win it in the end.
Absolutely.
And that, just helps the roster. It helps, make new matches and things like that. And I remember sort of looking at it and thinking, when you get down, that one of the other favourite things that I was going to mention about a Rumble, when you get down to like the final few participants, and you genuinely don't know who's going to win, because they were kind of all big hitters in their own separate way.
I assume you're referring to the one Billy Gunn there.
Well, I mean, Billy Gunn, what did he win? Did he win a King of the Ring as well?
He did,
You never know when his big push could have come.
Former hardcore champion.
But I think people could have looked at, entrants like The Rock, who was still there in the final few, and thought, well, he could so easily be the guy, even though when you look at any Rumble in that era, Austin's maybe the favourite to win it. Wouldn't have been a surprise if it was The Rock. And I think when Undertaker comes in, you're thinking he could win it.
Yeah.
You've got Kane there still in the mix, having been in the match for a hell of a long time by that stage. So I think the other thing that I loved about Kane, he didn't win. He wasn't the guy going on to, the main event or anything like that, but he also was kept strong all the way through it. So when he's eliminated, there's no feeling of, this guy's lost anything by being eliminated. He still came out as probably as big a talking point as the actual winner in the end.
Absolutely. It took Austin 3 chair shots to put him away. And I love that he did the big, like, kind of, like when you're taking a penalty and you run up from about 15 metres away because you're going to smash it. I love that he did the big massive run to get him out after that as well. No, you're right, like Kane came out of that. A monster is the perfect way to describe him. The big thing that I took away from this was, and I meant to go back and look for it after I'd watched it, but I wanted to see a Kane versus The Rock programme after watching this. Because they're going at it. Just something fierce. It's amazing. And that's something I'd like to go back and kind of look, because I don't really remember them ever going through any sort of long-term programme, but they looked like they had really good chemistry in this match.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think they did have a programme, which is maybe a bit of a mess. There's probably some matches here and there, but I don't think there was like any sort of long-term programme, which is unfortunate.
So, some surprises along the way.
Yeah.
Haku, the return of Haku, tearing about, giving people the chops to the head. That's pretty cool. What else do you like about this Rumble?
Well, I mean, you did have the Drew Carey comedy situation, which, you know, I'm never against outsiders coming in and being involved. I'm not so keen when they're, you know, put over on top of the actual, you know, talent that's there. So I thought if you're going to have something like that, you know, they'd built it up. He'd been appearing in the show, being talked into going into the match and things like that. And then he obviously gets a little bit of a fright when he realises the reality of the situation that he's in. So yeah, I'm not saying that was a particular highlight, but it was entertaining enough, and it didn't take over the show. You know, it was just a little, like 3 minutes or something like that,
Yeah.
which is digestible. And I think, you know, you get situations as well, like when Big Show comes in, and, you know, I can't remember his exact timeline for working there, but it'd probably been in the company a couple of years, but you'd always look at him and wonder, how could this guy not win a Rumble? And then he ended up being eliminated by, now I've got it written down, by The Rock, which, you know, again, it sets up a possible, you know, program or issue between the two, because one of the big things you're looking at when you come out of these is having as many, you know, options heading towards Mania as possible. Now it ends up being Rock and Austin, which is fine, but I think at this event the title's actually on Angle, is it? Kurt Angle?
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, it's for Triple H.
Yeah, so he must, between sort of at the next event, he must lose to Rock, lose the belt to The Rock to set up the Mania main event, which is obviously going to be money. And I think it does play a part that it leads into one of my favourite Manias. You know, it's such a huge show, and just, you know, when you look through all the entrants, and they're not all star names, they can't all be star names, but you had the sort of brief teaming up of the Hardys eliminating a few people together,
Yeah, it was
and
cool.
then kind of, you know, turning on each other to. And I like the sort of psychology behind things like that, because there's this logic that tells you if you're a team or a former team or anything like that, and you're in there at the same time and not the biggest guys in the world, it probably does make sense to team up. But at some point, you know, someone's gonna just have that moment where they think, well, I've got to get rid of this guy, you know. So yeah, I thought that was pretty cool, and that was right at the open as well, which started off pretty at a pretty good pace.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was a lot I enjoyed about the match.
Yeah, just going back to Big Show there. I don't know if it's JR or King. They've got a line. He's like a man playing with children. I thought it was amazing, and they put him over, like you say.
Yeah.
Like arguably, he's in the ring for about, I don't know, 30 seconds, and he's put over as that kind of Kane equivalent monster.
Yeah.
What else? I loved the Rock and Austin face off.
Yeah.
Austin covered in blood. Kind of harken back to WrestleMania 13. Yeah, but like you say, it perfectly sets up Rock Austin at WrestleMania. If you want to go back and pull together your little video package, then, you know, like, it's all set up there.
Yeah.
It gives it a wee tease.
Is that the one where at the Mania, Austin turns heel? Is that where they? I'm just trying to remember the timeline.
I want to say it is. I want to say it's 17.
Yeah. So they were both, you know, quite. Rock was always popular from a certain point. It didn't matter whether he was heel or babyface, but to see them sort of, like you say, face off when there's no obvious heel in the equation, you know, and they're both going to get the positive crowd reaction regardless.
Yeah.
Which was pretty cool, because you don't get that many moments.
It makes it feel quite grand.
Yeah.
Makes it feel big. Cool. Okay. Number 5, 2001. And number 1 for me. Okay. My number 5. Oh, that's thrown me for a loop, that one. My number 5 was 2008.
Okay, now, I don't think I have that one.
Okay.
I don't. No.
Cool. Okay, first thing I want to say about 2008 is the poster. That you get pretty cool posters for the Royal Rumbles, obviously with all the guys in it. This was a poster where they're all like fighting amongst each other inside a bus.
Okay.
It's nothing to do with the match. I just thought it looked pretty cool. This felt like a really special Rumble, and the reason I say that is you've got Michael Buffer doing the "Let's get ready to rumble" before it started, which was weird. I don't know if it was just because it was in Madison Square Gardens, just a bit random. But you've got Michael Buffer announcing. You've got it's in Madison Square Gardens. You've got that awesome camera angle of them coming, like straight down the lens.
Yeah.
When the guys are coming in, and then the commentary team: JR, Cole, Coach, Taz, King, and Jerry Styles.
No. Yeah.
This was random. When I was watching it, I was like, "Wait, and he's there, and is that Jerry Styles as well?" It just made it, I don't know, gave it that kind of, like you get a big boxing match and you get like a panel of experts all commentating. It kind of felt a bit like that. It was cool.
Yeah.
And then you had like Taz and King and I think even Coach talking about being in Rumbles and their experience and stuff. That was just quite cool.
Yeah, nice.
You had Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, number 1 and 2. And they'd been the last two in the previous Rumble. And it's just kind of like that continuity. And they'd had... is this when they go on to fight each other for a second year run at WrestleMania, possibly?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is, yeah.
So that's pretty cool. Just a kind of... It's like a wee nostalgia trip. And then just... Generally, like 2008 I don't think is a time where I would have been watching, but this is quite a good roster. We've got CM Punk coming in at 12, and he gets just a gigantic pop from the crowd. And then at 13 we've got Cody Rhodes coming in after him.
Right.
And if you've seen, there's a really good clip that I know that you've seen that you and I have spoke about before. An interview with Cody Rhodes that Inside the Ropes did. Yeah. And he talks about what it's like. So I think this was his first Rumble, and he talks about what it's like to come into the Rumble. And Punk telling him, like, what are you going to do when you get in? And he's like, what do you mean? What am I going to do? And he's like, well, you have to get your stuff off. This is your chance to get your stuff off. So he tells a really good anecdote about Undertaker, and Undertaker telling him to hit him, and putting his head down and speaking through his hair and stuff like that. It's just a really cool anecdote to have watched that, and then go and watch the Rumble that it played out in. Yeah. It just adds that kind of cool feel to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I remember you speaking to me about that, and then I went and watched the clip and watched that match, and it is one of those where, to Undertaker, it's kind of nothing, he's been there, he's seen it, he's done it, but to someone like Cody Rhodes, it's probably at that point the biggest moment he's experienced, and just that, I suppose you can see it from interviews and documentaries, just that sort of willingness to do these things to help guys along, and it's, nothing about it is going to negatively impact Undertaker, but just something like that interaction can really boost someone's career.
Absolutely. Something I took away from watching some of these Rumbles is how giving Undertaker seems to be. And he's willing to stand there and get beat up by both the Hardys and Lita, and get put out by other people that have won Tough Enough that we'll talk about probably at some point. There's a really cool little bit in this Rumble where you get Jimmy Superfly Snuka coming out. He looks a little bit like Mae Young, but anyway. And then right after that you've got Piper coming out after him. And they're both, the pair of them, just going at each other. And there's about 8 other wrestlers in the ring, and they all just kind of stop. And they're all just watching the two of them going back and forward. Yeah. It's pretty cool. You've got I'm sure you had like Punk like elbowing somebody, like nudging them with his elbow and going like, look at them going. It's pretty cool.
Brilliant.
And something that I never thought I would say, not being the biggest John Cena fan in the world, but Cena comes out right at the end and he gets the most ridiculous pop you've ever heard. He'd been out injured at this point and he wasn't due back. And he comes out number 30, and Triple H is over egging the pudding here. He's taking it too far with his reaction, but and this is the Rumble where they're literally stood pointing at the sign for goddamn ages. But aye, that is that surprise element of Cena coming back. It was really cool.
Yeah, I remember it purely for the comeback, actually, just because, like you say, it was so unexpected, and I don't remember there being whispers about it or anything like that, or certainly nothing I saw or heard. So when I'm sitting watching it while it was actually happening, I thought, and again, I'm not the biggest fan. I probably became a bigger fan later than I was in the earlier days, but it's that surprise feeling is a good one when you can capture it in a Rumble. It sounds like Triple H was doing more of his house show reactions than you would expect on a major show.
So yeah, that's my number 5, 2008.
Cool.
Number 4 for you.
Number 4. So I think I maybe mentioned to you at some point through the last couple of weeks that I'd really surprised myself with one that I was going to pick. So this is it. This is at number 4, and I never thought I would say these words in terms of one of my favourite Royal Rumble matches. It is Royal Rumble 2020.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, the one that took place just like 10 months ago. And there's a few reasons for it. I remember as a youngster, and then, with people like Andre, and then a little bit later on with what we saw with Kane and Big Show and things like that, is thinking, could someone ever just, dominate? And surely if there's a guy that dominant, he can just take people out as they come in, because, these monsters, if they were ever number 1, it might not be the worst thing, because you're in there at the start and it's 1-on-1, and you can keep it 1-on-1 for a big chunk of the way through. I'm not the biggest modern day Lesnar fan, but when he came out number 1 in the Rumble match and he just started doing that, he owned the ring. And he reeled off like these 13 eliminations, just one by one by one. And he's, taking a breather, he's having a laugh and a joke. There's a nice, comedy moment where he feigns that he's going to have an alliance with Shelton Benjamin.
That's cool.
And then he just gets rid of him and is laughing about it and joking about it. And then the fact that, he's looking that dominant and he's owning the ring at the Rumble, then makes it bigger for me when the winner of the Rumble, who's Drew McIntyre in this situation, and who is a guy they're clearly building for a main event run, not only wins the Rumble, but he also eliminates Lesnar. And for me, that just put he obviously already had the backing, and he was going to be, the guy for a while to an extent, but it just put that extra emphasis on him.
Yeah. As,
you've got this monster who's looking unbeatable, who's got all the credentials, but guess what? I just got rid of him and went on to win the match. So yeah, I loved the start. There's the little bit of me that, in a way, and we'll probably talk about this in other podcasts for other reasons, but in a way wishes it hadn't been Lesnar, because someone else going in and dominating who isn't a household name already maybe could have made someone, But I think for the sake of getting McIntyre over to the extent it did, it was worth doing, and it probably doesn't hurt anyone, that were among the eliminations. There were some big names in it early on, in terms of, people like Kofi Kingston, who went on to become world champ. You've got, physical guys like Big E and things that you think shouldn't be that easy to get rid of, but he was just dismissing them. And I think that the talent as well was one of the things that stood out, and we've probably mentioned in conversations before, strength of roster at various times and things like that. I do think, when I look through the names that were involved in this Rumble match, you sort of pick out potential winners, and they all end, well, most of them end up being there near the end. So I talked previously about having that sort of final three or something like that. Towards the end of this match, I'm looking and thinking, you've got McIntyre, Roman Reigns, Edge, Randy Orton, Seth Rollins, and you're looking thinking they're all believable winners.
Yeah.
And the other huge thing about it was the Edge return.
Yeah.
So, again, they'd managed somehow to keep it quiet. I think there'd been the odd hint and things like that, but every interview he was being asked, he was like, I'm quite happy with what I'm doing, stuff like that. There were the rumours he'd managed to get cleared, which he obviously had. But I think people believed at the time he retired, he had to retire, and there was kind of no coming back from it. He had gone on to do acting and things like that. And it just, it was, even though I'd heard the odd rumour, it was still surprising. And then they immediately put him over big. He was a contender in that match. He
Absolutely.
was eliminating people, and that is boom, immediately you've got another main event guy. But in terms of, you could see it in the crowd, and you could kind of feel it a bit, the emotion of that return, which you don't get an awful lot of the time unless it's, a genuine somebody had to retire and then they've made a comeback.
I'm getting goosebumps sitting here, genuinely.
So I at no point thought that I would be sitting here saying Royal Rumble 2020, but it just ticked quite a few of the boxes that I look for in a match. I think if anything, I actually enjoyed it more. I probably watched it, at the time it was on in January, and then I doubt I'll have watched that match since. So going back, I watched it just a few days ago, and I thought, yep, this is going to be in my top 5.
I'm delighted we got to talk about it, because it's not in my top 5, but it was, it was a 5.5 sort of thing.
Right.
Like you say, it's just a great Rumble.
Yeah.
I think Edge coming back like that, and if you've watched Edge 24, what's that program called, 24/7 or?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
It just adds all the more to it. It is really emotional, like you said.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, from my point of view, I don't know if I missed a couple of pay-per-views or something like that, but at that point, Drew McIntyre had been this kind of generic heel, Shane McMahon lackey.
Yeah.
And suddenly he was making a beeline for Brock, and he was pointing at the Wrestlemania sign. But it did it, like you say, it did its job
Yep.
perfectly. And going back to what we were saying about Undertaker there, I think applies to Brock as well. He's very giving. He'll sell like nobody's business for someone that he feels it's appropriate to sell for.
Yeah.
I think he's really talented at that, and obviously Drew kind of met that that level. So yeah, I agree. It's a really good Rumble. And I'd also argue, and I'm sure we could have this argument another time, that 30 men on paper in that 2020 roster, you could rival a lot of years roster-wise, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there is one that I've got coming up where the roster, actually there's a couple where when you look at the roster and do like a comparison, that actually the talent's nowhere near what it was in the one in January. But it's more about, I don't know, individual performance type things that made it go on my list, or some other factors. But yeah, the actual man-for-man talent that was in the match is really impressive.
Something that's quite cool about the more recent Rumbles is getting the NXT guys over. So getting a Pete Dunne over Aleister Black. I don't know if they were in by that point, or if I'm thinking of 2019. But it's a good vehicle for that as well, especially if you've got people that don't know NXT, and you kind of see these guys coming out of nowhere, and they look like established characters.
Yeah.
And they're they're hammering on guys. Was Keith Lee in that 2020 Rumble?
Keith Lee was in the 2020, and I think it was kind of his first appearance on the main roster stage, and I think he moved over quite soon after that.
Right.
Alistair Black was in the match as well, and came in quite late on and got quite a good reaction from the crowd. So yeah, I think it's sort of a way of showcasing these people, because they're you're effectively just catapulting somebody into what is the main event, and they might only be in it for a small segment, but it's eyeballs that might not have seen them before. So it's always good for them, and 30 men, and you're only ever going to have one winner and a couple of programs maybe that come out of it. You may as well put in some of the guys that are thriving on another brand. It makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Okay. Okay, so 2020 number 4 for you. So for my number 4, I have 2002.
Yep, I have that one.
Okay.
Yep.
Where do you have that?
I have that at number 2.
Nice. Okay, cool. So things that I loved about this Rumble. This was crazy, and this go back to Undertaker giving and putting people over. First of all, you've got him clearing the place up.
Yeah.
You've got him getting triple teamed by the Hardys and Lita, and him almost going into the fetal position and getting beat up by them. You've of course got Maven with the drop kick, and Undertaker's face turns around. That's brilliant. Yeah, you've got the popcorn machine and Maven just getting what looked like absolutely destroyed. I don't know how much that is real or not, but that poor guy, like, he's probably having the time of his life fighting Undertaker there, and then you've got all these guys pouring on top of him, like pouring pints over the top of him and that.
Yeah.
Do you notice that?
I did. Yeah.
We've got Kane literally picking up the Big Show and putting him over, like picking him up and body slamming him over the top rope. Yeah, again, Kane, like in a Rumble and doing something ridiculous. And we've got the perfect return as well.
Yeah, and I enjoyed that return. That I suppose he probably wasn't around too much longer after that, but it's it's the kind of guy who, he was probably actually not as old as everyone thought he was.
Yep.
And I sort of have really fond memories of him around 92 and things like that, and having intercontinental runs, and he's a this legitimate skilled worker that everyone no doubt has loads of respect for. So perfect for this kind of match, really.
No pun intended. You could draw parallels between his return there and Edge's return in 2020, I think.
Yeah.
Fair to say that they were, like, perfect. Obviously never held the world title, but I would say, in my head anyway, that they're fairly similar, like fan favourite type characters and all that sort of thing, and skilled performers, like you said.
Yeah, I know what you mean, and I think the guys that the company obviously trusted to do a lot of things for them, get over a lot of people for them, and things like that.
Mm. Yeah. One of the things that I really liked in this match, and it's an example of the kind of little comedy things that they can do in the Rumble and get away with it, because it takes up 10 seconds. But Booker T coming out at 30 and just like getting himself in his own head, getting all pumped up. He does a spinneroonie and then he's immediately out. That proper tickled me. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, for probably quite a few years in a row, they had an almost comedy elimination. Somebody would come in giving it everything, doing all their gestures and things like that, and then boom, they're out. But it normally wouldn't be, a main event guy.
Mm.
So it probably just that little element of surprise in it happening, somebody like him.
And going back to, I think, what you said in the very first one, strength of the Rumbles kind of reflected by the kind of final four.
Yeah.
you've got Mr. Perfect, Kurt Angle, who you could argue it would have been that current day's Mr. Perfect almost.
Yeah.
Stone Cold and Triple H.
Yeah.
That's a fairly strong final four.
Yeah, and this was the Triple H return, wasn't it?
Yep.
From injury, which meant that he's a funny character because he's probably 75% of his career he's played a heel, but every time he came back from injury, I don't know if it's just a respect thing, and are people genuinely happy to see a return of a top tier skilled worker, but I think he always, even if it was brief, got that babyface reaction.
Yeah.
Just by returning, which all adds to the emotion of it and things like that.
I think part of that's his music. That guitar riff is it, and you just get a bit. He just gets that pop. Do you remember the reaction when he returned on Raw?
Yeah,
after
I do.
Was that a hamstring injury? And it was just insane.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's quite a hated character as well. But certainly something about him coming out of nowhere.
He's a funny one because he's probably still, loved by a NXT crowd because, he's the guy that runs it, but walks out on Raw or SmackDown or something like that, and he's usually booed. But I suppose for loads of his career, that's what he's meant to be. That's the role. But yeah, there were a few notes I made on this, and one was, what Kane did to Big Show, just because of how impressive it was visually. And again, you're just thinking monster, and return of Triple H. Again, strength of the final four. It's probably, when you look at it, there is some guys you would maybe pick out and say they're a bit meh, but there's probably some stronger rosters. But I thought it was a really well put together match, and I remember everything with Maven. Obviously there were great plans at a point for Maven that's just all gone wrong somewhere, but I suppose it does just show, like you talked about earlier, the willingness to work with somebody and try and take them up a level, but yeah, it just long term didn't work out for whatever reason.
I mean, I'm not sure that wiping the floor with someone all across the arena and smashing his face up, I don't know. The elimination, yes, but Taker going mad. Yeah. This is the Rumble where Taker was really angry and Scotty 2 Hotty came out dancing, and just gets absolute. That was good comedy as well. He just gets floored with a right hand for the Undertaker. That was good.
Yeah, Scotty 2 Hotty was always good for things like that. I got the feeling he really believed in himself as the happy dancers.
I was watching that with my son, and he likes Otis, and he likes the Caterpillar, and he's saying, "What's this guy doing, coming out dancing like that, Dad? The Undertaker's going to get him." That was good fun.
Awesome.
Right, yeah, that's my number 4, 2002.
Yeah.
So
my number 2 it was.
Your number 2, okay. What's your number 3 then?
My number 3.
I wonder if we're going to align.
So my number 3 is 1997.
Ooh, nice. Okay.
So
that's not on my list.
Okay, now this one, it's probably on my list for a couple of reasons, really. I was pretty into things at the time. I was watching all the events, and I was just sort of regaining my enjoyment of it all after a few years of not watching an awful lot. So some of it's probably just nostalgia and timing and things like that. But a huge part of it was the situation with Stone Cold. So you had... Wait a minute. Excuse me a second. Do you know, I think I've written the wrong year. Oh, it was all going so well. Give me a second.
Yeah, sure. Do you want me to talk about my number 3?
You go for it, and
Just
then I'll
now,
step in.
Give you 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So my number 3 is 2003. Much like other Rumbles we've talked about as far as roster strength, I feel like this was a really good year for roster strength. This being the podcast that celebrates anything Christian related, we had just an excellent start to this Rumble. We had Shawn Michaels coming out first, and Jericho number 2, and we had Chris. Well, what looked like Jericho standing at the top of the ramp, doing his usual arms out, but it turned out to be Christian, who was aligned with Jericho at that time, and Jericho jumps in the ring behind Michaels, gives him the low blow, classic heel behaviour.
Yeah.
Just a cool kind of different start to this Rumble, and like I say, we'll celebrate anything Christian related on this podcast. So
Yeah, I remember liking that alliance and being, disappointed they didn't kind of make more of it. I think it got broken up fairly quickly, but I don't know, they seemed to go together, those two characters.
Yeah, that's quite a good wee programme going with the bet, the bet in relation to Trish.
Yeah.
Which ended up in some good matches between Christian and Jericho. But yeah. Further on in this Rumble, we've got Rey Mysterio in pretty early. I think he's maybe number 4.
Yeah.
If he wasn't, then it was fairly early. But he was just being absolutely ridiculous. Just a complete highlight reel of moves. If you ever wanted to get someone excited watching wrestling that's never watched it before, show them that. It's just amazing. You've got Edge then coming in not long after, and after the pair of them have kind of cleared things out, they do the same thing as what the Hardys did. You got the wee kind of high five, and they go at it. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
We had the most ridiculous crowd pop for version 1, Matt Hardy version 1.
Yeah.
It was just, I was a big fan of him at this point. And watching that back, I was quite taken aback. The fans really liked that gimmick, I think. And you had Shannon Moore coming out with him, and he was doing like really stupid things, like lying on his back and keeping his feet up so that Matt wouldn't get put out and stuff. That was quite good fun.
Nice.
And there's a wee bit where Jeff came in, and Jeff and Matt were fighting, and Jeff was going to go for Swanton Bomb on Matt, and Shannon Moore jumps in and lies on top of Matt like that was going to stop any sort of pain, but Jeff just ends up Swanton bombing them both. That was good fun.
Brilliant.
Something that I felt about this, and I don't know if it was intentional or not, but something I felt about this Rumble was that it starts off with your kind of smaller guys, and it progresses to much bigger kind of Land of the Giant type guys.
Yeah.
Towards the end there, we've got Kane, Undertaker, Brock, Albert, or Lord Tensai, or whatever gimmick he was portraying at that point, and Batista. And it just, like I say, it felt like it progressed from these kind of smaller. I think Guerrero, Eddie was in at this point. I think Eddie was in at that point.
Yeah, I think he would have been
early on as well. Yeah. Just kind of, it felt like it went for these kind of smaller cruiserweight, jumping around kind of guys into these Vince McMahon wet dream type of characters. But it worked as well.
Yeah.
They were really talking up Albert in this Rumble. I think he came in number 30, or he came in late on. Anyway, it felt like they tried to make him work so many different times, but it wasn't connecting, was it?
Yeah, I suppose he was quite a big guy. I don't know. I think they talk about the fact you have to be able to connect with a crowd, either one way or another. And I just don't know that he ever did that. In his run, I don't think TNA were successful due to his charisma. So yeah, I think that was another interesting thing when you were talking about, having the sort of lighter weight guys, more athletic guys in at the start. I suppose because being the sort of cynic that I am when I'm watching wrestling, I always think, they so often have a marathon man, a guy who'll go, half an hour, 45 minutes, something like that. And I suppose it opens it up to you looking and thinking one of those guys could be in here a long time because they've maybe got the stamina to do something like that.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if anyone actually would have been in that match. They didn't always do it, but yeah, I think particularly in the sort of 90s ones, there would usually be a guy that was in a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, this one did feel a bit different, and it felt like that kind of match of two halves. Which is interesting and different. I think that's probably, like why I liked it in the first place. So yeah, we had Lesnar winning this one, and this was round about his time of the next big thing, and he was I don't know. It's great to watch him when he's that kind of younger age.
Yeah,
and he's not just suplexing people over and over, and there's just something about him that was really good to watch at that age.
Yeah, when he first came through, I mean, I don't think I was watching, every show weekly at that stage or anything like that. But I do remember I would still watch most pay-per-views because I think they were still free at that point. But I remember thinking like that it's not normal for a guy that big to be able to move the way he could. And it does feel like ever since he, when he first left that time to, look at playing NFL and then ended up doing some MMA and stuff like that. I think when he came back, they were so focused on, I think, capitalising on his UFC stuff and making him look like this sort of ground and pound fighter. And he probably by that stage didn't have that agility in him, really. But he was so impressive when he was young. It was ridiculous. And
the only final note that I've got written down here was Maven tries again with the drop kick. And Undertaker just looks at him. I mean, why would you try that again after the popcorn incident? Come on. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed this. I toyed with this as my number one.
Okay.
But I just felt 2001 and the other one just edged it because of various performances. But
yeah,
have you sorted yourself out?
I've regained my composure. I was
Excellent.
never off in terms of the year. I knew exactly where I was. The problem was when I'd been kind of moving things about because you'd said my two and I went and looked at my notes for that. So I'm back on track. It's all good.
Okay.
It is 1997.
Okay.
That is the right one. And it's the sort of one of the, there were a few, but one of the real establishing moments for Stone Cold Steve Austin. So at this point in time, in 1997, he's kind of transitioning from heel through cool heel towards, most over babyface in the history of the company. And he comes into this Rumble match, probably not that many people at this stage viewing him as a possible winner. He comes in 5th, which is pretty early for, a sort of modern-ish, it's not modern, is it, 97? But, I think of, people like Shawn Michaels won from number 1 in 95.
Yep.
But you wouldn't think of Austin really doing that,
No.
But he came in at 5 and he was in the match for 45 minutes and he eliminates 10 people, which, that's putting him over massively. But the thing that I loved about it was the sort of added controversy that they'd never really done in a Rumble match before, because Austin, who wins it, gets eliminated. He gets eliminated by Bret Hart.
Yep.
So Bret Hart has he's back in the company. He's always going to be main event picture around this time, so he is a possible winner. Everyone's looking at it thinking he's very, very possible as a winner of this. But he's starting to become, the slightly whiny Bret Hart. So when things don't go his way or when he thinks he's been mistreated, he's speaking out and having a whinge and a moan, but he's not heel yet. He's still got the majority of the crowd backing, and most of the things he complains about, the crowd would be thinking, yeah, that's not right, so sort of really capitalising on that. Austin is eliminated by Bret Hart. Austin looks around and can see that no official has his eye on it. There's things going on at other sides of the ring and things like that. So he just goes back in under the ropes. And as far as all the officials around the ring are concerned, nothing has happened. And then they, go full on with that angle because Austin eliminates Bret Hart. He eliminates him right towards the end of the match. Is he the final elimination, actually? I think he maybe is. Yeah. So Austin, who has been eliminated, wins the match due to, officials' oversight, which, when you think about it, with everything that's going on around the ring, people teetering at various points and things like that, in thinking logically, that could happen. You would think it's totally possible for something to be missed. So I thought it was a really nice twist on it because we hadn't seen it before. And I thought that it helped put someone over who they were obviously starting to make plans for in terms of going to the top. But it also kept the likes of Bret Hart strong because he has legitimately been cheated out of winning it. He should have had the title shot. So the other thing I liked about it, obviously, you've got, out of most Rumbles, you've got the road to WrestleMania. It's the first stop on the road to WrestleMania. But they were able to really then take that and get a few more angles out of it. So because of the fact the refs missed it, yeah, that's fine, Austin wins, but we're going to put in this caveat that we have another match to dictate who's the number one contender because he cheated to win it. So they came up with a In Your House, the Final Four, which happens after the Rumble, before WrestleMania, which was supposed to be to determine the number one contender. And it had all the key people that Austin had eliminated after he had been eliminated. So it was cool. Austin, Vader, Undertaker, and Bret Hart. And it ends up, they go with Bret to be the guy that ends up taking the title because that was Shawn Michaels vacating the title, so the Final Four match actually ended up being for the belt, not for the Mania match.
Just when he lost his smile.
Yes.
Poor guy.
So what they ended up getting out of it was, you got that program where he ends up Austin and Bret Hart continue to end up working together. You get all the angles of, Bret becoming hated in America, loved in Canada. You get the Mania submission match and all that, and the sort of official final turn where Bret is full heel by that point. And it just all ties in really nicely with how they set this match up. When we were talking earlier, the big thing that stood out to me, much as I loved the match, and I think everyone would hear 1997 and think, oh, the roster must have been good then. In terms of actual, talent, physical talent, it's probably nowhere near what they ended up having, because you've got the likes of Crush is in the match, Ahmed Johnson, who was over for a while but couldn't really do much. I think in this match they actually had the fake Razor. In the Rumble match, they had the Godwins, Phineas and Henry, was it? I think they had Bart Gunn, a very over the hill Jake Roberts. So there's a lot of guys that you wouldn't put in a Rumble now, even at the equivalent of what they were then, because they probably don't have the talent for it. So it wasn't that it was stacked with talent. It was more about the sort of story that they got out of that I loved. And the fact that you could end up cheering in a way for a guy who really took advantage of a situation. So it's, he's been eliminated, the noble thing is, you just walk back, you've been eliminated. But he thought, well, wait, nobody's seen me. That's great. Take advantage of the situation. And I think that all played into his character. I mean, even when he was a full-on babyface, he'd still, by any means necessary, do what needed to be done. So, yeah, I rewatched it. There's probably the first part of the match isn't the best. It's not got great athleticism. It's not got some of the moments that you've come to love in Rumbles where somebody sneakily somehow balances on something and escapes going out. I think, Kofi Kingston every year or whoever it happens to be, which is always really good fun. And it's missing a lot of those elements. But from the storyline point of view and what Austin did, I just loved it. I thought it was a brilliant story to tell.
Do you know what's really interesting about that is in 1997, you're blurring the lines between what the fans see as classic heel and classic face behaviour.
Yeah.
Like even now, you would see someone like, try to think of like a crafty heel character, like Dolph Ziggler. You would see him doing something like this.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't cheer him. But yeah, it's the fact Austin does it and gets away with it, and is seen as this kind of badass. It's somewhere in between a face and a heel.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to think back that this is like 23 years ago, and like they talk now about kayfabe being dead, but like at that point you're kind of you're absolutely blurring the lines between face and heel, and are we supposed to be cheering for this guy that's going against authority and all that sort of stuff?
Yep. So yeah, that in terms of match quality, and to be honest, if we go through Attitude Era, that wasn't what it was about, really. I think a lot of match quality nowadays is a lot better than it was then. Mm-hmm. But it was about story, and it was about building the characters and having these not over the top in cartoonish terms characters, but really over with a crowd, and knowing how to communicate with them and interact with them. Even you mentioned the physical things, the little heel tendencies and things like that. And I just thought it was really well done and really well executed.
Yeah, I agree. I watched this Rumble relatively recently as well. Something that got me was I got totally done by the fake razor. I was convinced that was Scott Hall and was completely confused. Anyway, can we just recap for a second?
Yep.
So my number 5 was 2008. My number 4 was 2002, and my number 3 was 2003.
Yep. Now, let me just make sure I'm not getting mixed up. So my number 5 was 2001. My number 4 was 2020.
Yep.
My number 3 was 97. My number 2 was 2002.
Okay.
So
cool. So we've talked about that. I suspect that my number 2 will be your number 1 then, but we've already talked about my number 1, which was your number 5, which was 2001. My God. So yeah, my number 2, which I expect is your number 1, is 1992.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just before we get into it, I think what you were just talking about there about story and characters, and also like nostalgia and what the age that we were at the time that this happened. I think that's what tipped 2001 over for me, mainly Rock Austin and just that story.
Yeah,
but
that's fair. Yeah.
You know, like if we're going on a lot of things, 1992 is, it's pretty close for me. But 1992 is just incredible. There's probably 2 men responsible for that, but What do you like about 1992?
Yeah, I think you start it off with the fact that it's actually for the title, and just for context, you've touched on it earlier, but previous to this, the winner of the Rumble didn't even get the guaranteed title shot. You know, it just raised the stakes so much that, you know, this is actually for the belt. And then you, right from, basically from the start of the pay-per-view, even before you're at the Rumble match, you have Bobby Heenan, who is, you know, being really offish with his co-commentator Gorilla Monsoon, which he, you know, so often was, but he's so in the moment and wrapped up in the fact that his guy, Ric Flair, can win this, and, you know, shut everyone up about people like Hulk Hogan and things like that. He brought Ric Flair in because Ric Flair is the real world champion, and now he's going to win this world title, and he'll show you all. And he just gets so carried away with himself, and you would never, I can't ever imagine a commentator performance like that one ever happening again, because you've always, you know, in most booths you've got your guy nowadays who he'll affiliate a bit more with the heels, but he's not necessarily full on heel. You know, he'll have a line, and he'll if someone crosses it, you know, just to get things over, he'll say, yeah, that's gone too far, or that person's gone too far, or whatever. Whereas then, you know, it wasn't just the fact that everyone knew where they were with Bobby Heenan, in that he didn't like Hulk Hogan, and he'd always had programs of guys that were up against Hulk Hogan, and he never won. You know, he very occasionally got a, you know, dubious Andre title win or something like that, but he never came out on top of the angles, you know, long term or anything like that. And this full belief in him that this was his guy that would finally be the top guy, and he would be standing there with him, it just kind of took over the whole show, but in a really good way.
Yeah.
Because I mean, for me, Bob Heenan is probably the best ever announcer, and he was probably the best ever manager. But this was the performance. This was the show, and there's so much in it. And you know, you've got the early stages of the match, and they start off pretty strong, because you've got like the British Bulldog, Ted DiBiase, and then they're starting the match off, and then the Flair comes out at 3, and Heenan right from that point starts it's almost like he's bargaining, you know, he's like screaming no, because he can't believe his guy got number 3, and then he starts with, there's this phrase that he says so many times through it, which is, this isn't fair to Flair. And it's peppered around the whole show, and it's not one of those shows where, you know, you have a monster who's eliminating loads of people or anything like that. It's more paced, it's more steady, and there's always a few people in, certainly from a certain point onwards. But Flair actually does an hour in the match. He's in there for an hour, which, you know, it seems incredible. But for huge parts of that, he's actually playing it really clever, as, you know, a heel would and should, in that he's backing off from people, he's backing away from people, he's cowering in a corner, and there's these little bits and pieces where you're looking thinking, you know, you kind of have to admire the fact this guy goes an hour and wins it, but he's not like the dominant hero character. He's quite sneaky through all of it, which really fitted with, you know, the character he was playing and things like that.
Yeah, it's not like your kind of typical Iron Man type performance, is it?
No, because I think, so he does an hour. I think that the Bulldog is in for about half an hour maybe.
I thought the Bulldog was brilliant in this.
Yeah, it's probably, he's had a few good Rumbles. There was one that I was considering for this, which was 95, where the unique thing about 95 was the first 2 people in are Bulldog and Shawn Michaels, and the last 2 people in are Bulldog and Shawn Michaels.
Cool.
So I was considering that for that, you know, sort of totally different slant on the match. But
Mm-hmm.
I think he's got quite a history of going long in Rumbles, and it seems to suit him, that sort of style of match, Bulldog.
I was really impressed by him. He was good.
Yeah.
Something that stood out to me, but beyond, just going back to Heenan. Heenan's performance is the equivalent to Kane going an hour in that
Yeah.
Rumble that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
It is masterful. It's just unbelievable. And without that, take him out, and Flair's performance would still be what it is, but it wouldn't make the Rumble what it was.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed.
Heenan is just amazing, truly amazing. But something that stuck out to me, and this will segue nicely into what we're going to talk about in our next episode, was there was lots of guys, think about the rosters, lots of guys that were at that kind of intercontinental level that just seemed to be like a bit of a conveyor belt of these kind of top class wrestlers who were on that kind of just sort of teetering towards the glass ceiling. So you had like Texas Tornado, Greg the Hammer Valentine, Roddy Piper even, and they just seemed to be coming one after the other. And I don't know if that's a reflection of the age that I would have been at that time. So I would have been 9 at that time, but all these guys just seemed like superheroes.
Hello?
You still there? Oh. So yeah, it just felt like there was that kind of peppering of these kind of, I don't know, like I was saying, kind of felt a bit like superhero type characters coming out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of just looking through the names that were in it, just to refresh my memory. And you've got, what would have been quite a young Shawn Michaels, but you've got people like Texas Tornado. You've got Hercules, Big Boss Man. I think I saw Tito Santana.
Yep.
So yeah, probably a lot of guys that were just under main event rung, but they were these. I think it maybe not outrageous characters, but quite interesting out there characters.
Yeah. And we've spoke about Macho Man during our last episode quite a lot.
Yeah.
He was just acting like a complete maniac in this.
Yeah, I love Macho Man Randy Savage. It's no doubt going to come out in many of the podcasts we do, because I think that, again, he's another one of these guys, regardless of whether he's playing babyface or heel or somewhere in between, he just had this over-the-top personality and way about him, and it came across as totally believable, that he was that guy. Maybe he was.
Yeah, I don't know if it got to the point, or if it was that believable, that I don't know if he actually was like that or not.
Yeah, and I know you do hear stories about how people get a little bit too caught up in the character they're portraying, and I think themselves struggle to, find the line between real life and who they're portraying on screen.
Something that I've got down in my notes here was the number of back body drops that Flair took.
Yeah.
Like, what age would Flair... Flair always looks like he's... to me, there's no differential between Flair wrestling at 60 and Flair wrestling at whatever he would have been here, 1992.
Yeah, I think he's late 40s.
Right, unbelievable.
At that point, yeah. And obviously, amazing stamina and all that. And I think, how he always used to have the chops as well. He would get in some sort of chopping contest with someone. And I think that those were his staples, in that he was a really good seller. So, he would take all the moves that somebody else was doing, but in a Rumble match, he took a hell of a lot. He took a lot of moves.
There's a few times he did the classic wander out of the turnbuckle and then just face plant.
Yeah.
That was good.
Apparently, it wasn't something that McMahon was a big fan of, but he just did it anyway.
Like
the crowd always reacted to it.
That's brilliant.
I noticed that something that I was hearing about on another podcast. It was one of the Bruce Pritchard podcasts. The timing of Rumble matches and like putting them together from a booker point of view.
Yeah.
In they would sort of start off with who's going to win, right? So who do they need to have an angle with at some point in the match, right? Okay, put that in. Any other main angles we want to create, right? Put those in. Make sure those guys are kind of in there at the same time. And guys generally knew the order of elimination, and who they were to eliminate or be eliminated by. But other than that, they didn't write every minute of a match and things like that, which probably allowed people who were in there a long time, like Flair was in this, to just do their own thing and ad-lib a bit, rather than being overly scripted or rehearsed, which I think plays into a lot of the good things you see happen as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that. Actually, that's something I want to raise as well. What a logistical nightmare that must. I would imagine it's probably quite a lot of fun. But quite a lot of stress as well involved in that.
There's one thing I wrote in my notes, and I don't know. Every time I watch this, I see it, but I don't know if it's because I was never the biggest Hogan fan.
Oh, here comes the Hogan hate. I thought the Hogan hate would get here.
Hogan turns heel in this.
Yeah, he definitely does. I've got it written down here. Hogan is acting heelish.
So I mean, he every man for himself. The title's on the line, and he's in there. There's only a few bodies left at this stage. And he is cleanly, eliminated by his friend Sid. Is he Vicious or he would be Justice at this point? I'm assuming.
I think so.
So Hogan's out. He's eliminated from the match. He's furious. He's pointing. He's accusing, a guy of cleanly eliminating him from the match. So I don't know what the issue is supposed to be there. But then Hogan, who has been eliminated, assists full heel Ric Flair in winning the match by eliminating Sid. So, I mean, if it's anyone else, the boos are out, the full heel turns on, but with it being Hogan, I don't know, it's just kind of glossed over. Nobody really makes a big deal of it.
Has to be involved some way or other. But yeah, no, totally agree.
And then there's a few more as we get to later stages of the match. There's a few more Bobby Heenan classics. Like he's saying things like, "I swear to God, if you let Ric Flair win, I will never do anything bad again the rest of my life," and things like that, which is just brilliant. It's such a sort of tour de force of commentary.
Oh, absolutely. And I think Monsoon is just, well, I was going to say he's just as good, but he plays his part perfectly.
Yeah.
Along next film.
He's so good at doing his, will you stop, and he just always gets to the stage where he's had enough of him, and there's the odd threat, and I can get you thrown out of here, or a physical threat at times and things like that. But what he never actually does is it's obvious in this show Heenan's commentary is one of the stars of the show, and I'm sure it was always designed that way. And you're right in what you say, because Monsoon, he's the supporting character in the commentary, even though he's the lead announcer in it. He's kind of secondary to it, because he's kind of generally just letting Heenan do his thing and go so over the top.
Yep.
And I think you're absolutely right in what you say, in that if Ric Flair wins this Rumble, in an hour, wins the belt, without Bobby Heenan's commentary, it's maybe still a, top 5, top 10 quality of match because of the individual performance. But it's not the one. It's maybe still a, top 5, top 10 quality of match because of the individual performance. But it's not the one that you remember. It's not one that stands out. It's not one that for me is number one, because it's so much of that is about Heenan. It's
absolutely.
It's just a brilliant performance, and it's one that I think I mentioned on our last podcast, that you remember a lot about when you were a young kid, So I was probably looking at 92, so I probably didn't get the VHS until maybe 93 or 94 or something like that. And I wasn't, seeing any weekly programming or anything. I don't think we had Sky at that point. So it was just, follow each pay-per-view as they come out on video and watch them. And I thought when Hulk Hogan appeared in this Rumble, and it's for the belt, as a young kid, this is a no-brainer. He is going to win it. And I think part of my fondness for it, and it's not just because I'm not the biggest Hogan fan, was there was that element of surprise, because I didn't, certainly not at a young age, follow really old school WCW. So I knew when they put over Ric Flair as this other champ from another place, to me they were always less than. So I was thinking, okay, but he's not going to be Hulk Hogan or something like that. But if you need to put a guy over for him to go an hour in the Rumble and win the belt, that's it. I can have to imagine a lot of fans in America were maybe watching both programs, so they probably knew who Flair was before he appeared anyway. But as someone who didn't, that's just really putting him on the map as, oh, maybe this guy could be as big as Hogan. He probably never really. Yeah, so when I was young, I was very much WWF fan, and I was aware of WCW, but I wasn't watching it. Didn't really have access to the programming and things like that. So when this guy Ric Flair appears, to me, he's come in as very much underneath guys like Hogan, even Savage, and people like that. I didn't view Flair as top tier just because I hadn't really been aware of his work elsewhere. Far more aware of it now, and far more respect for all of it now. But for me, if you want to get a guy over who, I'm sure wouldn't have been the only one, people maybe had their company, if they really were WWF or WCW fans. And for me, the fact that they put the belt on the guy and had him go an hour in the Rumble, what better way to establish him as an absolutely top tier guy?
Absolutely. And he gets his character over remarkably well after the Rumble when he's celebrating as well. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Is that with the tear in my eye promo?
Yep.
Yeah, brilliant. He was one of the best talkers, but sometimes it was rambling, but sometimes it just came across brilliantly.
Something that we've not talked about from this Rumble that I just happened to notice, and I remember I wrote it down and I was laughing. Our boy Jack Tunney comes out, the Wizard Oz returns again, and makes a god-awful announcement that is so uninspiring. Howard Finkel takes the microphone off him and he's visibly shaking his head at him. It's amazing.
Yeah, I always wondered because apparently he was this guy that, I think he was pretty high up in one of the companies that Vince bought out when he was taking over and going national. And I think he just stuck around for a few years but didn't really have a part to play, so they just wheeled him out. But why even wheel him out if he's going to be, delivering promos like that?
He basically just repeats what Howard Finkel's already said, but with a lot less sort of excitement and panache. It's just quite funny. It truly is a brilliant Rumble. Could easily, it's obviously number one on yours.
Yeah.
Between that and 2001, could quite have went number one on mine as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's cracking. And just one last thing to mention on that is looking back at the Undertaker, and just seeing across these Rumbles the evolution of the Undertaker. And I know there's been a lot of that recently, between the various documentaries, but he's full on Undertaker character here. I don't know. Do you know when he debuted compared to when this is? Is it 1990 he debuted?
Yeah. So what have they just? Did they say it was
30 years, aye, so it must have been
it would
90.
Yeah.
He just feels a proper, well-established, high-level heel
Yeah.
in this Rumble, and he's that monster character, and to still be going like he is, and like, well, maybe not recently actually, but yeah, to still be going in some of these early 2000 Rumbles the way he is just really incredible.
Yeah, it's impressive because I mean, there's so few guys that had the longevity who were pushed as a monster in the first instance, which is what he was. And he was still, at that stage, 92, he was probably one of the biggest guys that would have been in it, and one of the most sort of ominous, or probably the only really ominous presence.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I mean, yeah, hats off to him, and he's made his mark in a hell of a lot of Rumble matches as well as all the others.
Absolutely. Good stuff. Cool. Do you think we've said all we need to say on 2001?
I think so. I mean, all I would say to add to what we've said is it just needs to be watched by everyone with the sound on. Just get the feel for it and listen to the commentary. Maybe doesn't. I've found myself at times nowadays I don't really pay attention to what's being said on commentary a lot of the time and things like that.
You don't listen to Corey Graves talking about King Corbin non-stop?
So something's changed somewhere along the lines in the announcing, but for that, I mean, if you were going to watch it without or on mute, there's probably no point watching it at all.
Aye, absolutely agree. Bobby Heenan, MVP.
Yeah.
Okay, doke. Okay, let's just let's one last time. Let's recap our top 5 Royal Rumble matches.
Yep.
In descending order, mines were 2008, 2002, 2003, 1992, and then 2001.
Yep. So mine were descending order again. 2001, 2020, 1997, 2002, and 1992.
Cracking. Great stuff. Yeah, I'm going to miss watching Royal Rumble matches for research purposes. So before we go, we could talk a little bit, 2 minutes about our topic for episode 3.
Yeah.
So having talked about it, and there's so many different things that we want to get to. I think we're both pretty keen to get onto groups and factions and tag teams and and things like that. But we've decided for episode 3 that we're going to do our top 5 Intercontinental Champions.
Yeah.
Which feels like something that's pretty near and dear to both of our hearts.
Yeah, I think when we think about and look at the names and the possibilities, I mean, for some things, Rumble matches was tough enough to whittle down, but I think Intercontinental Champions is going to be a tough one to get to the 5. Just because I think when we decided on it as a topic, there were so many that immediately sprang to mind, and that sort of looking at researching and doing the fun bit of researching, which is watching some matches, but also just looking at length of run, how many matches did they get anyone significantly over during that time, and because it was always considered the workhorse belt, it's over the years it's supposed to have been the title belt that one of the best actual workers in the business had. So yeah, there's a lot of people and a lot of different elements to consider to go into it.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. I think I mentioned to you that when I looked it up this week, there's been 177 different Intercontinental reigns.
Yeah.
Although multiple reigns within that, but yeah, looking forward to that one. I think I've got a list of 12 at the moment, so
that's a good start.
You're
further along than I am.
Great stuff. Well, thank you for that. Episode 2 in the bank.
Thank you.
And we'll look forward to episode 3.
Yep, looking forward to it.
Great stuff. Catch you later.
Cool. Cheers.